So today I wrote this function called add, and I'm not sure if this is going to give me a proper answer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new unit test for this add function. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new file, and this file is going to be called main_test.go, right? So this file has to end with test.go. That's pretty much all you have to remember right now. Okay, and this is going to belong to the package main, right? So if you want, you can give it to the package main_test or package abc. It doesn't matter, right? But just stick with main, it's easier. Let's make a new test. The only thing you have to keep in mind here is that this function name has to begin with test, right? So it has to be test, then whatever you want, right? It can be like this, doesn't matter. But it does have to begin with test. That's the only condition. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say got. This is a very common way of doing testing in Golang, where you just run a function and you get a result from this, and then you check whether or not this is something that you expected, right? So I'm going to say if got is not equal to 0, right? So if adding 0 to 0 does not give you a 0, then you are going to fail this test. How do we fail this test? We do t.error, and I'm going to say test failed, adding 0 to 0. Right. Okay, so let's open a terminal. So to actually run this test, we do go test, hit enter, and as you can see, we got a fail. Adding 0 to 0 does not give us a proper answer. Okay, let's go back to main, and as you can see, we are adding a to b plus 5, right? Let's delete this, save. Let's run this again, and as you can see, we got a pass. Awesome. So let's say we have this add function, and this add function returns a plus b. Now, here's the thing. What if I come back and I rewrite this to be a plus a, right? And I test this. So the test case passes, but this is not a correct implementation of the add function, right? So how do we test this, right? Let's go back. So as you can see here, I have a single test case, right? So what I would want to do is I would want to take this, right, copy and paste it a couple times and have different cases. So for example, with this one, that could be like add 0 to 1, for example, right? So the way that most people do this in Golang is they have this kind of structure. They create a bunch of test cases like so. So we create a bunch of test cases like this. If you want to, you can create an anonymous struct like this. It's going to have the first argument to this function, second argument to this function, and what do you expect to get back out of this function, right? And I have 3 cases. So I have one testing zeros, I have one testing positive numbers, I have testing, and I have the final one testing negative numbers. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to get rid of this, and I'm going to write a for loop. Iterates over. So we create a for loop like this, which ranges over all the cases. It tests every case, right, like this. And finally, it checks if what we want is actually what we got. And if it's not, then we just fail this test like so. All right, so let's run this. So it failed this test, adding 1 and 2, and also failed this test, adding -1 and -2. So this is something I forgot to mention, but if you run this error function here, it's not going to terminate this function. What's going to happen is it's going to mark the test as failed, but it's still going to continue to the next case, right? So it's going to check all the cases, even though this case failed. If you have a lot of cases and you don't want to check all of them, you would have to use a different function in place here to terminate the function when it fails. Let's go back to a clean slate and let's talk about the different kinds of failures you can invoke in the unit test. The one that you already know is t.error, right? So this is very basic. You say failed test, right? Let's run this. As you can see, we've got failed test. What this does is it marks your test as failed, but it does not stop executing the function, right? So if I run this again, as you can see, we got test failed and test failed again, right? So this is something you use when you want to continue running a test even though it failed, right? So if you're in a situation where you need to stop the execution of this function once the test failed, you would have to use something like this, t.fatal, right? So this will, this function fail, if you run this, it's gonna stop this test add function, and that's it, right? So you may want to use this if there are situations in which if something fails, you don't want to continue testing because whatever reason, right? So the two ways to fail a test are error, which basically allows you to continue running tests, and fatal, which stops the execution of this test function. There's also a third one, which is not necessarily a failure, it's a skip, right? It's called literally skip. And this one, okay, so this one's kind of interesting because if we go back and we do go test, right? As you can see, it actually passes, but it doesn't pass because the unit test passed. It passes because this unit test was skipped. So if you want to skip unit test, you may want to use this skip function. Yeah, that's pretty much for this section. So let's say I want to build a very fancy like test add function, right? And this test add function is going to be like hundreds of lines long. It's going to be huge. It's going to have like helper functions. It's going to be wonderful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a new helper function, f. And this helper function is just going to fail for whatever reason, right? Right. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to call this on line 10, and I'm going to call this on line 11. Let's run this test. Okay, so let's see. We got a failure on line 6, and it failed for whatever reason, right? And we got a failure on line 6 again, and it failed for whatever reason. Let's go back. So what we have here is we have this problem of we have no idea if it failed here or it failed here. I mean, both of them failed, but the question is which line called this f function. So the way you solve this is you simply do t.helper, right? So if you run this function t.helper, it actually helps you out because now you will be able to know which line you're getting this message from. So as you can see, we're getting line 11 failed for whatever reason, line 12 failed for whatever reason again. And as you can see, corresponds to line 11 and also corresponds to line 12 right here.